Let's now understand the concepts of the MVC pattern and its building blocks. That will help us greatly when creating those different building blocks in an ASP.NET Core MVC page. The letters MVC stand for Model View Controller. The MVC pattern is an architectural pattern that has been around for quite some years. It is not something which is unique for ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core, far from it in fact. It has been created with this idea in mind that our code or classes should be doing one thing and one thing only. In other words, to improve the separation of concerns. Without the MVC pattern, we often end up with code where UI logic and business logic is mixed. On one line, we update UI, and on the next, we have logic that gets something from the database. When we need to make a change to our application, we'll have to retest much more code than if we separate things. We'll thus have less dependencies in our code, and that is of course a good thing. Applying the MVC pattern results in more loosely coupled systems, and the net result is that we'll get software that is much more testable and maintainable. In MVC, we typically have 3 building blocks. The models contain the data the user works with. These are the domain model classes as well as operations to work with this data, often referred to as the model logic. Typically, the classes in here represent everything in the model that we're going to work with. In the case of Bethany's Pie Shop, we'll have a pie class, an order class, but also the classes that allow interaction with the database, so repositories, will be part of the model as well. Controllers are the glue between the model and the view. Controllers will provide the logic that works on the model and provide data for the view to display. The view will finally contain logic that displays data to the user so it can again be processed by a controller action. When we look at the flow we'll get in ASP.NET Core MVC, we'll see that the request will be arriving with one of the controller classes that we'll have. Controllers have action methods, which are public methods that get associated with a URL. So when the user browses to a certain URL, the specific method on the controller will be invoked. This, in turn, will trigger code on the model, and a view will be selected to be displayed with the data from the model to the user. Views in ASP.NET Core MVC are using Razor, which is the view engine. If you know Razor from previous versions of ASP.NET MVC, you'll see that in terms of Razor, not much has really changed in that area with the release of .NET Core. If you've never used Razor, well, don't worry, we'll look at it later in this module. It's actually very simple to learn. It is important to understand that there is a difference between ASP.NET Core and ASP.NET Core MVC. ASP.NET Core is, let's say, the foundation. It's the open source framework that allows us to build modern web applications. ASP.NET Core MVC is basically a layer above, and it brings to the table the ability to build web APIs and web apps. Indeed, both websites and web APIs are often built using the same MVC-based approach. Next to MVC, other frameworks plug onto ASP.NET Core, such as the Razor Pages framework and Blazor. We'll look at both of these later in the course.